Welcome to another Crucible tutorial. Today we'll be doing a detailed guide on CSM, how they play, and a few general build orders you should do. I'm here today with a guest. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks Oleg. My name is Avenge. I've been a Crucible tester now for quite some time, and I love playing CSM, so quite excited to be here.
Thank you. Glad to have you here. So, as always, when you're learning a new faction, I recommend that you go into a skirmish game with dev mode on and just play around with the faction. See how the units play, see how they stack up to other units, read the descriptions, all of that. So, without any further ado, let's get going. So, CSM is an interesting mix where it's a powerful mix of Space Marines and abilities provided by the dedication to the Chaos Gods as well as demons. It also allows, because of the dedication to the gods, it also allows for powerful distinct playstyles, but because these choices are locked in once they're made, it is impossible to change. Their units are also, for the most part, expensive, so losses can be quite costly. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I'd agree with what you said. There are some interesting decisions you can make throughout the game. The majority of the units are expensive. There are a few niches here and there, but yeah, I do agree.
So, in general, for key features in CSM, it's mostly just the favors from the different gods and the different Chaos Space Marine chapters that you can get. Where for them, their subfaction system is a lot more core to their faction than for others, so they play a big role in how you'll play CSM. The way we'll do this is we'll first go through the faction without picking any subfactions, and then we will pick the subfactions one by one and go through them and all of their units and what they do. Afterwards, we will show two build orders, one using the Khorne and Nurgle one using World Eaters and Death Guard, and one using Emperor's Children and Thousand Sons. So let's have a look at what they have in Tier 0. Do you want to talk about the Heretic?
Would love to. So the Heretic is your builder unit. It has a unique feature after the Armory is built that allows you to increase how quick they produce buildings or build buildings at the cost of their health. It's a very good way of getting those buildings created and getting out of Tier 0 faster.
Yeah, I would say it's actually better. It's actually even better when you get into Tier 1 and you're trying to build a second HQ and the additional generators, because that can take a long time for other factions. But with CSM, especially with the Hellsmith, which we'll go over when we get to it, it can be very quick. So,
definitely a very powerful ability.
Yes. Cultists are your basic infantry. They are quite cheap. You get 4 models and a purse at the start, and they are only 20 requisition each. So they start off as your basic capper unit, but they do have additional value over time that we'll get to, especially when we look at the subfactions, where it's not unlike other factions where you simply want to throw away your Tier 0 capper units later on. You do want to keep cultists because of their unique upgrades that they get. They will also get both detection and infiltration as well, making them both survivable and a key part of your early game if you're facing anything like Tau or Eldar.
Yeah.
Do you want to go over CSM?
Yeah, of course. So your standard Space Marines, or Chaos Space Marines in this case, are your Tier 0 basic range / melee heavy infantry unit. Throughout the game, they can actually keep up pace up until around tier 3 due to their varying upgrades. We can get into that shortly, but they are a powerful unit in the earlier game, and definitely a unit in the earlier game that you kind of want to look after. You don't want to lose too many models, as it generally can be quite taxing in the earlier stages.
Yeah, they are very expensive with 90 requisition per model. So, Raptors are next. This is your fast attack melee squad. They are 80 per model, so still very expensive. They have very bad range damage, but good melee as well as a jump, and are in general quick. They do get some... We'll talk about weapons in a second once we have all the tier 0 units and the armory, but they also get some weapons for extra specialization. Renegades, do you want to talk about them?
Yeah, so basically the Renegades are a cheaper alternative to buying Space Marines or Chaos Space Marines. They aren't as expensive as previously stated and are far cheaper to reinforce. They do have a interesting weapon variety, which again we can get into shortly, but they can get out of the gate quicker. They can help you to solidify your position on the map sooner as well.
Yeah. Attack bikes, fast attack disruption unit. Make special note of the burnout abilities. It's one of the main AoE abilities in tier 0, where if you're facing versus a swarm, having 1 or 2 chaos attack bikes use their burnout will really hamper your opponent's attack or make it easier to attack into them. When you get into tier 1, I think it's tier 1, let me get the armory to check that it's not the armory. No, when you get into tier 1, they're also able to reinforce into 3 models and get some extra weapons as well. And Chaos Lord, heroes is not something that we'll be covering in depth here, just because of their complexity in both use case, when you should use them, what you should get on them, etc. So as with most of the other guides, Chaos will be heroes will mostly be left to the side for their own specialized videos. But he is a powerful melee unit. One thing to note is that he does have an ability to spawn something on the ground that will provide detection, and that can also be important if you are out of cultists.
Especially useful if you're going against the tower in the earlier game as well.
Yes. So now let's look at the armory as well and talk about some of the weapons. So first thing to note is this research here. This is the one that provides your cultist detection. Very important. Increasing the speed of the Raptors, like giving the Raptors an ability to go even faster. Quite useful if the fast attack unit is not fast enough for you. Then grenades, those are relatively standard. Good AoE, good disruption, decent bit of damage. And then standard power sword and plasma pistol upgrades for leaders. So let's talk about weapons. Cultists, they get grenade launchers and plasma guns. As you can see, grenade launchers you can get even in tier 0. And this is your listening post buster. If you find yourself in a situation where the opponent was able to sneak one of your listening posts, or they have an undefended listening post somewhere, this will often outrange said listening post as long as they have vision, and it won't be very quick, but it will kill it relatively quickly.
I would like to add as well, one of the good things about the grenade launchers for the cultists as the game progresses is that they're a fantastic disruption option. They're very good at distorting enemy lines, especially with lighter infantry, and will assist or help later down the line to solidify positions once again with the rest of your army.
They don't do friendly fire. So plasma guns, you get these in tier 1. This is your, if you want to try to make cultists relevant in tier 1 option, where there's other ways to use them for utility, but if you want to make them into a squishy ranged combat unit, you get plasma guns for them. You'll be able to get quite a few of these in tier 1, especially when you get the heavy weapon increase. So they will do a lot of good damage to infantry and especially heavy infantry. So moving on to Chaos Space Marines, they have a wide variety of weapons. Flamer, good morale and infantry damage, okay building damage as well. Heavy Bolter, this is a way to kind of get budget Havocs, which we'll go over when we get into tier 1, but you can, long range, good damage, but requires a setup time. Plasma Guns, similar idea to Cultists, but on a tankier unit, and they will do a bit more damage per model. Melt-A-Gun, this is your tier 1 anti-vehicle. Missile Launcher, this is another long-range tier 1 anti-vehicle, with the difference being that it requires a setup time, but it has a longer range. And the Volkite Caliver, which is if somehow your Chaos Space Marines survive all the way into tier 4, this will be a decent weapon upgrade to get for them. It has good versus all damage, so this is just your kind of stay in the back and do decent damage weapon, assuming that these guys survive. Anything else to add?
No, I think you covered everything there. I found it particularly funny with the Volkite weapon that if it does make it that far into the game, you're kind of going to need that
yes,
extra power.
Which, to be fair, it does have a purpose, because there's actually these two upgrades here. One in tier 1, which will make your cultists invisible, and that will help them survive in your backline. As mentioned before, if you want them with grenade launchers or plasma guns, this will be a key part of that, where the enemy can't shoot them if they can't see them. And in tier 3, your Chaos Space Marines will get their infiltration, which is what keeps them relevant in later tiers, because you can do kind of sneaky strike attacks at them. So if you survive into tier 4, you could do a sneaky thing where, let's say there's a lone Titan without units around for detection. It could actually be kind of viable to infiltrate your Space Marines and use a deep strike to get them in with Volkites near the Titan, and they will probably deal with it relatively well. It's not an optimal strategy by any means, but there's an interesting niche for them there that can be filled. So,
100%.
Moving on to Raptors, Flamer, similar idea to the CSM Flamer. Good infantry damage, decent morale damage, okay building damage. Can fire well on the move, so it does give them a bit of range damage, especially when they're moving around, because their pistols they have very low damage, first of all, and second of all, they will miss. Flamers will not miss at all, even on the move. And then Melt-A-Gun, and this is their kind of different specialization, where you could turn Raptors from a strictly melee unit to a good ranged anti-vehicle unit, where if you're facing infantry in tier 1, you keep them in melee, but if suddenly vehicles appear, you can get Melt-A-Guns, swap them to ranged stance, and they will deal with the vehicles relatively well. So, moving on to Renegades, they, as mentioned before by Avenge, they have a interesting selection of weapons. So Grenade Launcher, same thing as the Cultists. Flamer, same thing as the other Flamers mentioned. Plasma Gun, same thing. Again, not as squishy as the Cultists, but still not as tanky as the Chaos Space Marines. So if they're there, if they survive and you need heavy infantry damage, Plasma Guns. Melt-A-Guns, same thing. Missile launchers, same thing, already discussed. And this is the interesting one, Mortar. So this is kind of like a grenade launcher, but even longer range and with a setup time, where this turns them into something of an infantry artillery, where they'll sit in the back and they will shell your units. Because usually, so for now, with the units that we have 2 lines with CSM. We have the front line, which is your infantry melee units, and you have the kind of middle line, which is your somewhat medium-ranged units, with the only exception being stuff like the heavy bolter and the missile launcher, which would put them in the 3rd backline. And this is also a thing to put you in the backline, where they're now sitting in the back and just shelling your enemy.
100%. There would be something I'd like to note to that, is that that upgrade, although it is exceptionally good at breaking morale, you could think of it as a grenade launcher on steroids. It can also do damage to your own units. So if you are playing with a melee front, it is a bit of a double-edged sword, so it does require you to have some forward thinking. Otherwise it is an absolute, it's an absolute fantastic weapon to use, though. Especially transitioning from the early game to the mid game. Really good unit.
So, quickly to go over the Chaos Attack Bike. Flamers, again, good infantry and morale damage, okay building damage, will also do better when firing on the move. And plasma guns if you need heavy infantry damage. So, I think that is everything for Tier 0 covered. So, we'll move on to Tier 1. So, first of all, let's get the buildings. So, first thing first, Eye of the Warp. Do you want to talk about this?
Well, yeah, I can touch on it. Basically, Eye of the Warp, you can think of it if you are an IG player or have experienced other factions that use any kind of spy mechanic where you can...
revelation kind of type of ability.
It's essentially the same thing for CSM. However, they do have a very interesting ability. The tooltip does state, if I'm not mistaken, that it has a 30%? 20%? 25% chance to corrupt enemy morale, corrupt their binds of the foolish, and have them attack allies, disable infiltration, detection, and ruin the movement speed of all units. Right. So, bang in the middle of where it was. However, this can be a massive game changer. It doesn't require any power acquisition to use, and it can completely ruin your enemy's morale. So, in the right use case, it is
it doesn't affect
fantastic. Allies. It also doesn't affect demons. I don't think it affects demons.
No, it does not affect monstrous creatures or demons.
Okay. Yeah, so in the right use case, you can turn the tides of a fight just by using this. If you get that dice roll.
Yeah, it's especially good if enemy is clustered in a blob, especially a ranged blob. Many factions like to just have all their ranged units stacked together, and that's already vulnerable to grenades and things like that, but this is even more punishing, where ranged units running out of morale will do basically no damage, and reducing their movement speed will also make them easier to catch, and they'll have a harder time retreating. So, moving on to the Chaos Temple. There's only one unit that we can, a new unit added in Tier 1, and this is where the Subfactions come in, where all 6 of these slots are for Subfaction units, and 2 of those units are Tier 1, but they're not here right now because we were not talking about Subfactions right now. So keep that in mind. If this looks barren, that's fine. That's because we're going over the base roster, and the roster will be filled out once we talk about the Subfactions. So, let's talk Havoc Marines. Do you want to go over them real quick?
So the Havoc Marines, these are any Space Marine players out there. This is your Devastator Marine equivalent. They are fantastic anti-infantry, anti-heavy infantry, or can be upgraded to be anti-vehicle. They do require a setup time, and they are relatively slow in comparison to standardized units.
Yeah. So in terms of their weapons, they have the anti-vehicle missile launcher, again, long range, kind of low fire speed, but good damage. Then autocannon, this one is interesting, where it will do less strict infantry damage, but you're also gaining okay pens versus structures and vehicles, so this is your anti-everything upgrade. Last cannon, your tier 3 anti-vehicle, where missile launcher, will get outscaled at that point, but if you get last cannons, you'll still do good damage to tier 3 vehicles. And then again, the Volkite, if they somehow survive into tier 4. Which, again, they are a long-range unit, so they can sit in the back. So this is just a niche for them. So as for extra upgrades in the armory, there's a few more grenades, smoke grenades, stun grenades, crack grenades, if you've watched any of the other guides, which I recommend doing, especially the Space Marine one. These are pretty standard. Then a few other things. Accuracy, extra weapons, standard infantry upgrades. If you're going for infantry, you need to get these 3. That's non-negotiable for them to scale properly. Purge the weak. This is just extra health to the leaders of your squads, which are aspiring champions. And you also, as previously mentioned, get the Cultist infiltration. So they are now invisible, they can get plasma guns. How many plasma guns can they get with this? They can get 8 plasma guns or 8 grenade launchers. And you may note they have 12 squads, so 2/3 of your squad will be equipped with heavy weapons, which, yes, it's pretty expensive to do that, but they will also do very high damage for a unit with only 2 pop cap.
Yeah, and they can also become very, especially if you're playing against CSM. I can't tell you the amount of times that once an enemy has got that upgrade in tier 1, it becomes really difficult to deal with them. It does kind of force your enemies to get that detection unit. So it is a fantastic upgrade to get if you want to go that kind of playstyle.
Yes, for sure. Cultists are quick, so if you're able to get them around the map and they're invisible, it can be quite difficult to get enough detection to deal with them. Chaos Sorcerer, this is your other source of detection, and they have a lot of powerful abilities. One thing to note is that in comparison to something like the Librarian, they don't have any researches in order to enable certain abilities. Their abilities are enabled by simply getting the hero levels. So that's something to keep in mind. The abilities will be mostly self-explanatory, so just get the hero levels, go through them yourself, see what they do. There's a lot of interesting ones, but I won't go through them right now. Other units. Thunder Psych, Chaos Psyker, another source of detection, and Chaos Icon Bearer. The Chaos Psyker, it's mostly there for the abilities, where Doombolt is a way to deal a bit more AoE damage, and this is your single target as well.
Something to note with this ability, every time you use it is a bit of a gamble. Having used the Psyker quite a bit, when you do use it, it has a chance of actually killing the Psyker. Yeah. So be a little cautious while using it, because although he doesn't cost a lot in the earlier game, it can be quite, 100 is quite a bit, but
yeah, 150,
especially in the earlier game, you're really gambling. So Doombolt is what I would personally suggest to use consistently, and if you were in a dire situation, then go for Strip Soul.
Yeah,
because
Strip Soul is primarily meant to be used versus commanders, because commanders, especially most commanders they'll have war gear at level 3 or level 5. Most will have this war gear at level 3, which gives them a shield, which means that they receive 30% less range damage. But any sort of ability damage goes through that. So versus commanders, this ability is doing 30% more damage than any ranged fire, so that's its primarily use case. If you're facing enemy commanders, if you're facing Space Marines and they're kind of leveling their commanders and investing thousands of resources into their commanders, you know, getting 5-6 of these and then having a few die through casting Strip Soul is not that big of a payment to get rid of those pesky commanders. And Chaos Icon Bearer, so if you don't pick any subfactions, this unit is pretty basic. It just has a morale aura. It just provides a little bit of a morale buff to allies. Nothing special. But when you go for your subfactions, you'll actually see in their description, it will tell you a special buff that the Icon Bearer will have. So for example, if you go for World Eaters, Icon Bearers will provide a damage aura. Death Guard will provide a health regen aura. Emperor's Children will provide a movement speed and morale aura. And Thousand Suns will provide a faster ability cooldown aura. So keep that in mind. Very powerful support unit. You can often get it on squads as well, where many squads will be able to add an Icon Bearer, but if there are squads that can't, or if you just want to grab a few to run around with your army without attaching them to squads, that's not a bad idea, because all of these buffs can stack. So, moving on to vehicles. Chaos Rhino. This is your standard transport, ram, deploy mines, the transport support abilities. Nothing really much to say there. Chaos Dreadnought. By default, this is a melee walker that can also get ranged weaponry. So Heavy Bolter will give it good anti-infantry, Multi-Melta will give you good anti-vehicle, and then autocannon if you need both vehicle and structure damage. Well, if you need basically damage versus infantry, vehicles, and structures. And last cannon if you want long range, because the Multi-Melta will deal more DPS, but it's shorter range, whilst the last cannon is long range, but it will be less DPS. Vindicator. Let me get these. Range tank, AoE attack, so pretty good versus swarms of enemies. Its primary purpose is to bust and disrupt infantry or to deal with structures, where it also has good anti-structure damage. And Hell Talon, fast aircraft unit, it will do decent damage versus infantry and structures, but less than other vehicles. That's because it's quick and with a jump. This is your assassination unit, where if you have a key target or something far away that you want to try to destroy, that's when you use it. It also has an ability to drop bomb on enemies, which can be useful later on to also deal with blobs of enemy infantry. Anything else to say about any of that?
No, we can get later down the line. We can talk about how the Dreadnought with its upgrades, how versatile it can be due to infiltration, and the Talon as well is really fantastic. Like you said, in terms of jumping into the lines, perhaps taking out a few plasma generators. Even if you lose the unit, to taking out a plasma generator is usually worth it. So it's a very good unit.
Thank you for reminding that. Yeah, so Dreadnoughts can get infiltration in tier 3 as well, meaning that you can have invisible, long-range anti-vehicle in tier 3, so that can be quite powerful, and there can be quite a few shenanigans with that. You can also equip Rhinos with smoke launchers, which again, like smoke grenades, will just reduce enemy damage and increase your unit survivability. Anything else? So tank traps, mines are relatively self-explanatory. Tank traps, you put them down if you need to deal with vehicles coming at you. Mines if you need to deal with infantry coming at you. the turrets, relatively standard, just normal turrets. They start with a heavy bolter, can get the missile add-on or probe. And yeah, so that's about it, I think, for tier 1. Oh, oops, nearly completely forgot. Hellsmith, this guy is amazing. So this is your elite builder, and he has forced labor, which affects both himself and so this is a timed ability. Unlike the other one, this one isn't a toggleable, it's a timed, but it makes him build way faster. That, in combination with forced labor on the Heretics, is amazing. You can get, I won't be able to show it in dev mode because everything builds instantly, but you can get a HQ and 6 generators twice as fast as any other faction because of this. This is part of the mid-game power of CSM, where if you have the resources, you have a much easier time getting up the infrastructure needed than other factions.
Yeah, if you are very good with balancing your economy and you want to escalate your economy, having forced labor and getting the Hellsmith quite early on is incredible at snowballing the game.
Yeah. So let's go into tier 2. In tier 2, you don't get any units in the Chaos Temple just yet. Again, we'll get to that later. Nothing new here, nothing new here. In terms of new vehicles, it's just the Chaos Predator. And again, as you can see, there's a lot of missing slots. We'll get to that later when we get to Subfactions. Chaos Predator, relatively similar to the Space Marine Predator if you've ever played with that. Starts with a battle cannon and some bolters, good anti-infantry damage. Can get, in tier 3, a bunch of last cannons to deal with vehicles and also do decent damage versus Titans. So, in terms of new buildings, there's 2. So, there's the Demon Pit, which also has a few extra units and a few extra researches. And there's also the wall. So let's go through the Demon Pit units. So first of all, Possessed Marines. As you can see, quite expensive of a squad. 500 requisition and 90 power. So very requisition heavy. But they have a lot of health, they don't have morale, and they are quick. So this is your kind of tanky melee frontline unit, where you use it to be your frontline whilst other units do the actual damage. Where they do decent damage by themselves, don't get me wrong, but they won't kill everything for you, but they will tank everything for you.
One of the biggest things with this, as well as you all saw, but they deep strike.
Yes.
With having them deep strike, especially like if you were to purchase them, deep strike them just at your base, reinforce them, put them back into deep strike, and send them into, you know, the front line. They are, you really don't want to underestimate them, especially with the upgrade that allows them to spew fire, which can be effective against morale. Very good unit. Expensive. Got to use them in the right scenario, but yeah, they are very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, with this fire upgrade, oopsie, didn't mean to click it. They do also get a kind of as they're moving in, they will also fire a flamer-esque attack, which will do very good morale damage. So it solidifies their role as a frontline disruption unit. So yeah, and that's it for now for tier 2. Just because, oh yeah, the walls, to quickly go over them. So this add-on will come back to when we're going over Subfactions, where it won't do anything right now, but when we pick Subfactions, this add-on will give the walls extra interesting abilities. So, going into tier 3. So, in terms of buildings, Warpforge, this is your equivalent to the orbital, what's it called? The tier 3 Space Marine one that allows to deep strike?
Oh my god,
Orbital beacon. We're both banking on it. Anyway, the one in tier 3 for Space Marines that allows you to deep strike. So you can put a lot of your infantry into it, as you can see. Can you put vehicles into it? You can put dreadnoughts into it.
Yeah, it depends on the vehicle.
Yeah, so yeah, it can build a lot of the prior mentioned units along with a Dreadclaw. This is... I'm not going to mince words, this is a meme unit. It's just there for the funny, because it's funny.
I would be lying if I said I've ever used it. But yeah.
It can't move.
Bit of a meme.
It can just build dreadnoughts. It can deploy mines. It has a jump. It's this... So basically, the reason why it's here is because CSM have this thing on the tabletop, sorry, a little bit of a side rant, where their drop pods that they drop units out of, they can actually bring them on the tabletop, and they have this shenanigan that I've seen a few CSM players do, where they drop their units out, and then they have the ability to jump from one area to the other, to use like a jump-esque ability. And then they have a special thing that you can do where you can kind of drop bombs for the units under you when you jump and do some mortal wounds with that. So yeah, that's where I know these things from. It's very weird, it's very meme. I might make a proper purpose for it later, but for now, this is just here for the memes. You're good to just ignore it for now.
Or you could use it in style on people.
Yes, yes. Once, when you see in the changelog that it's changed, or if you see that its description is different from what it is right now, feel free to try it out and actually try to use it, because I've probably given it a purpose, but right now it's a meme. And that's fine.
Orbital Relay.
Orbital Relay, that was the name, thank you.
Yeah, and also one of the...
It does have a cool animation.
That was cool. I haven't actually seen that.
That was very cool.
One other thing.
It's a shame, it's such a cool unit.
In the Demon Pit, last year as well, you also have the squad cap increase. That's something that was from last year.
Oh, you could do that in tier 2, right? I forgot that you can do that in tier 3. So yeah, so another thing with CSM, they get the squad cap increase quicker than most other factions, I think. Definitely than their Space Marine counterparts, where your squads will be bigger and they'll be slightly better operated and do slightly more damage with the weapons and stuff like that. So yeah. So before we move on to the units, let's talk about the new building as well. This thing.
Ooh, I love this one.
Yes. Chaos Shrine. So this is both a turret, oopsie, where it has an attack, and it's also your income building, where if you look at the requisition real quick, your requisition increases when you get this building. So yeah, this is your income. This is your tier 3 economy building, but it's also a turret that can attack. So when it comes to later game, you are actually much less vulnerable to deep strike than most other factions, because your economy is also your turrets, which they also have a small AoE on their attacks, so they will also protect you from especially enemy infantry deep strikes. It's really fun.
Can't exaggerate either, those turrets are strong.
Yeah.
They are strong. They're expensive. They're very expensive.
Yes.
They are strong.
It is more expensive and not as it provides you the same bonus as other stuff, but it is more expensive than most other economy buildings, especially because it scales both with requisition and power. Usually economy buildings only scale with power, so that you can get more generators to get more requisition to get more generators, and kind of bootstrap yourself that way. This one increases in cost both in requisition and power because of its turrets, so it is slower, it is less efficient than other factions, but it is powerful and protective in the meantime. You can also use them in your front line as well, because they're turrets, where if they die, it is annoying, yeah, because you lose a little bit of economy, but you're also protecting yourself as well and preventing further losses, so there is a case to be made to building them in the front lines as well. So, moving on to new units. Let me delete some of these. It's getting a bit clustered. So, Chaos Terminators. This is your Tier 3 ranged infantry, where they have, as you can see, mostly infantry upgrades. This is just an emergency melee upgrade in case you really need melee, but there are better melee options in Tier 3 that we'll discuss. They start with decent, they start with okay melee and decent ranged, and they're able to get a lot of ranged weaponry. This is where their main power comes from. So, heavy flamer, AoE attack, so any flamer with the heavy on it will have AoE. This is just a general rule in Crucible, where if it just says flamer, it probably won't have AoE, or it will have a small AoE, whilst heavy flamers will have a big AoE. And good infantry, heavy infantry structure, all the standard stuff for flamer. Reaper Cannon. This is the better, higher tier version of the autocannon, where it will do good damage to everything, particularly good damage to vehicles, and decent range. Plasma Cannon, AoE, that's good versus infantry, heavy infantry vehicles. Yeah, just a different version. And Volkai Charger, which, again, this is your tier 4 jack of all trades kind of weapon. Yep. And Lightning Claws, again, as I just mentioned, these are just there in case you really need melee. Yeah. Anything else?
No, it's just emphasize on if you really need melee, because as we're going to get into now, the up and coming units, yeah, they definitely excel in that area.
Yes. It's very rare that you will need it, but it's there. So, other units, let's get rid of some of the vehicles here. Defiler, powerful melee walker, somewhat similar to the Dreadnought, where it starts mostly in melee with a decent battle cannon ranged attack. Think similar to the Vindicator. But then it can get a missile launcher for long range. A twin link last cannon as well for just single target anti-vehicle, and the Desecrator battle cannon, which again is just, this one won't be able to fire on the move, so it will turn it into more of a range specialization, and it is very expensive, but it is also quite powerful. Yep. Anything else to say?
No, they are incredibly powerful. They are quite expensive, as you've said. You can get all 3 of those upgrades, right?
Yes, you can. Yes.
Yes.
So get both of those if you need to.
Yeah, it turns into a bit of a powerhouse. The last one, like you said, is more of an artillery basis if you need additional artillery. Yeah.
So to elaborate on that, it starts with different weapons, most of which are basically mostly good versus infantry and a little bit versus vehicles and structures, mostly due to its melee. And then these weapon upgrades just change those weapons into being anti-vehicle weapons. And then, so the battle cannon is now gotten, as you can see, much longer range, slow attack speed, but big explosion. Death Wheel, interesting unit. So its damage is okay, but nothing to write home about. Its main thing is Rampage, where it can just... Are you gonna run? Okay, unit is a bit bugged. Might need to fix that, but yeah. Main thing is the self-destruct, where you run this into a bunch of enemies, and you click self-destruct, and they're forced to either target this unit down, or it will explode doing massive damage. So, suicide unit.
It is insane damage as well. It's nothing to joke about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Thunderhawk, this is your transport. This is the actual transport that the Dreadclaw wants to be, which, quite frankly, this has 2. We might be harping a bit too much on the Dreadclaw, because you get it a tier earlier, and it can hold 2 units. This can only hold 3, so And it can only build Space Marines, so Dreadclaw might actually be better than the Thunderhawk.
I mean, I don't think it's too bad. It's just when you have the options of other things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But yeah, so this is your transport, where if you need to transport your units away around the map, you can sometimes deep strike them, but deep strike doesn't always work. You need to have vision, and they do have somewhat limited range, whilst this has basically near infinite range, and it can hold a few units, and you transfer them across the map. So, yeah, relatively simple. Land Raider, a Brass Scorpion. Land Raider, pretty standard. Land Raider, it's a Land Raider. Like, there's not much to do it. Oh, it has 2 descriptions. Why do I have 2 descriptions? Whatever. Derp. That's something I'll have to fix. So, yeah. High transport capacity. Can hold Terminators, where some of the lower tier transports can't. Has the support abilities, is tanky, has this ability which makes it even tankier for a while, and yeah, 6 transport capacity and relatively quick. Brass Scorpion, just melee. Well, it has okay ranged, but mostly a melee brawler unit, where it has decent damage versus all, explodes on death, and can do decently well. Think of this as your get under the Titan and smack the Titan, or as your vehicle front line to cover for other backline stuff, where, as you can see, it has a lot of health and is quick. So don't underestimate it. It's quite good for what it does, especially for only 200 relic.
Another thing to note with the Brass Scorpion, the 3 abilities it has are very, very potent. The first one, Desecration. Really good when there's a swarm of light, heavy infantry. At that point in the game, when you've got relic units and everything else, you're probably not going to see that too much. But for example, you're playing against the Tyranids and they've got lots of swarms. This ability on its own can clear out most of the Tyranid swarm units.
And it's worth mentioning that the Defiler has the same ability as well.
Yeah.
So yeah. Death Whirlwind, similar thing but in melee, where if the swarm is on top of you, because its attack doesn't actually have much of any melee, any AoE, so this is the try to deal with some infantry that are surrounding you type of thing.
Does a lot of morale damage too.
Yeah. And then this is another way of dealing with swarms. So you may note that most of its abilities are anti-swarm, and that's because, by default, it will do well versus single targets. Its problem is getting swamped by swarm units. So its abilities are specifically designed to make it better versus in those situations.
Another thing, when it dies, it explodes quite violently. It does quite a lot of damage around it, so if you know it's going to die, kind of get it in there.
Yes. Get it in there quickly and let it explode. So, I think that's it for Tier 3. You do also get a Squek and Squad Skies increase, and another thing to note is that Terminators don't start with a jump. You need to get this this teleporters research, and then they're able to jump. And same goes for the other Terminators that we'll discuss later.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't the Chaos Space Marines Terminators teleport is quite quick as well in comparison? And there isn't much of a delay on how they teleport.
So most you might be confusing with Unification or other mods, where I think I've made it so most teleports on Terminators don't have much of a delay. There may be a few that have for reasons stayed with the delay. I know what you mean. I've mostly removed or changed that at this point.
Oh, then that's my apologies. My apologies on that.
Okay, so moving into Tier 4. you get a few buildings. Gate of the Dark Mechanicum. This is, as its name would suggest, your Titan building. This is where you get your Titans. We'll discuss them in a second, because I want to talk about the Desecrated Castle. So, this is your secondary economy building, where it has this add-on. It's expensive. It's as expensive as going tier 5 is, and it takes a while to get. But if you get it, not only do your super weapons recharge faster, you also get a large bonus to both requisition and power, and being an add-on, you can build it on multiple separate desecrated castles and they will all stack. This is your uber late game. Like, the problem with that the CSM had before is they had good early game, they had good mid game, they had terrible late game, and they had good uber late game. Now, with even better mid game with the Chaos Shrine, because it can give you more economy, and just more tools in tier 3 and tier 4 in the, like, not uber late game, in like early to mid late game, this becomes really powerful, where it's now your uber late game and it's strong. Like, it's strong. Especially, I know that some people don't use nukes, or some people have nukes banned. I understand why they do it, but also that causes problems for balance, because, for example, it's a core part of CSM, as you can see here, where the second upgrade of these, as you can see, it's slow. Like, with this being, I think, 1,000 times the speed of research, it's still very slow to research. So, yeah, the second one of these that requires tier 5, your super weapons recharge 10 times faster. You can be firing off warp storms left, right, and center, and so if nukes are disabled, yes, Chaos Space Marine late game will feel gimped because it's just you're missing one of its core features. But yeah, any other thoughts?
No. I do agree with that. Actually, it's an interesting thought process. Like, there are quite a few players that don't play with that element, and it does hinder quite a few factions, not just CSM, but a bunch of others as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Desecrated Castle is. I understand why you wanted to jump to it.
Yes, it's a very fun building that does not get the attention it deserves, because
Totally.
most people either ignore nukes or don't use them appropriately.
Or some of my favorite units.
Oh?
Yeah, the Obliterators and Mutilators.
Yeah. So, yeah, speaking of which, this is what we'll go over next. Let's get more of these. So, Obliterators, Mutilators. Very relatively simple to use units, very expensive, akin in cost to Centurions, maybe actually more expensive than Centurions. So, Obliterators. Let's deal with those first. These are the ranged unit, where they actually have a combo of a few different weapons. As you can see on their model, they have like a few weapons bolted on, and yes, all of those will fire, so they have a few different weapons altogether, which ends up with combining with them being good versus pretty much everything.
Yeah, they're exceedingly powerful. Like, yeah, and they do get affected as well in squad size, right?
Yes.
The upgrade squad size does affect them.
Yes, it does. So they can, in tier 4, go, if you have both of the squad size researchers, which you should have by the time you can get tier 4, you have a squad of 5 of them, which can be very strong. One thing to keep in mind, they are vulnerable to being tied into melee, where their melee damage is very bad. So keep that in mind. Mutilators, similar idea, where they're not as potent in terms of pens, but they are your melee unit, where they are tankier. Let me reinforce them to 5, where, as you can see, they are significantly tankier than the Obliterators, and they have really good damage. It's not as generalized damage, but this is your front line. And keep in mind, both of these units can be deep striked from the Demon Pit, either straight away or reinforce them, put them back, and deep strike them. So yeah, anything else to say?
No, I just really want to exaggerate just how much I love the Obliterators specifically. They are crazy strong. Like, in many use cases, I've used 2 squads and been able to wipe out most or, about half of an enemy army. Because used correctly, they're incredibly powerful with their jumps.
Okay. Yep, I can definitely agree with that. So, a few other things. Helldrake. This is another version of AoE, now in tier 4, where, as you can see, its main attack is a massive AoE. It can spawn Hell Talons, it's an aircraft, it can jump around. It will also do decent damage to structures, so there is also a use case for them to jump into the enemy base and kill their generators and just in general kill their buildings. But keep in mind, their flight speed, as you can see, it's not the slowest, but it's also not the fastest. So if the enemy has good anti-Titan in their base, it will die before it can do much damage. It will also deal well with other aircraft, so if you're struggling with like Dark Eldar Air or Eldar Air, this is a good choice to go for. Does the Titan ability research affect them? It does affect them. Okay, cool. Yeah, there's also, keep in mind, there's this research that will increase its and the other Titan's health. So, Feral Titan. Similar to the Warhound, but it doesn't have as many weapon upgrades, where it just starts with the anti-vehicle weapons and can get plasma guns for decent versus all, so it doesn't have the same weapon versatility. It is tankier and faster, so that's something to keep in mind, where it can get around the map quicker and it doesn't require as much investment to actually get it up and running, but it's not as strong in terms of damage.
That's saying that after the Warhound gets its upgrades, right? Because I feel like the Feral, as soon as it comes out of the Dark Mechanica, it's fairly strong in comparison to...
Yes.
CSM,
it is much stronger than the baseline Warhound as it comes out of the factory.
Ironically, out of the gate.
Yeah, out of the gate. Nice. That was good. But yeah, no, it's much stronger baseline, but it's not as strong when fully upgraded. It might still be relative in strength in normal upgrades, but when, for example, for Inquisition, where they get their godly plasma cannons, or when Space Marines get their Emperor's Armory researches, that's when it starts to fall off.
Yeah.
But CSM have been given other tools in Tier 5 to keep up, which we'll go through when we look at Subfactions.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah, Ravager Titan, this is the equivalent of... which one is this?
I can't remember.
God. Sorry, we're terrible with names today. So there's a Space Marine and like Imperial equivalent of this. But yeah, again, similar idea. It's faster, it has more health. Its upgrade requires Tier 5 instead of Tier 5 plus the Emperor's Armory research, which it is for the other ones. And it's still good damage. It has some AoE as well. But yeah, just in general, CSM Titans are more powerful starting off, and more powerful quicker, but not as powerful when fully upgraded. Is the thing to keep in mind.
By the way.
Reaver, yes, thank you.
Imperial Reaver Titan.
Yes, thank you. And I think that's it for Tier 4.
Well, there is those upgrades in the Demon Pit. I think that would be quite important.
These we will talk about when we go to Subfactions.
True.
Because they depend on the Subfactions. So yes, remind me to talk about these when we're talking about the different Subfactions. Okay. So, yeah, with that, let's go into Tier 5 and talk about what? Is there anything? I think everything...
I don't think so.
Yeah, everything in Tier 5 is related either to the... No, sorry, there is a thing we can talk about on the Chaos Sorcerer.
Oh, yes.
The rituals.
Oh, God.
Because those require...
massively powerful abilities.
Yes. So this is the other part of this is the second part, sorry, of the late game, where this requires hero level 8. So let me quickly get that up. You can pick one of these 3, and to be clear, these are add-ons. So if you don't like the one you picked anymore, what you can do is you can kill your sorcerer or your demon prince. Well, let's actually talk about this one now. So in tier 3, you get access to 2 possession researches. We'll leave this one for subfactions, but this one we'll talk about now, where you can turn your chaos sorcerer into a demon prince. So if you don't like the ritual that you picked for your sorcerer or your demon prince, you can kill them and resummon the sorcerer, and you can pick a different ritual. So the rituals are sacrifice, drain life of enemy infantry globally, and they can't do anything. All-seeing eye, reveal the entire map. I think this is both sight and keen sight, but I'm not 100%. Regardless, if you're on a big map, like often you're like searching the entire map for the one base that the enemy has, so especially on big 8-player maps, this is amazing to both see what the enemy is doing and find where they're doing what they're doing. And confusion, which forces enemies to attack each other. The most expensive, but also probably the most powerful, especially as you get into the late game and the sheer firepower of enemy units increases, because this is mostly a way to disable enemies where, sure, the damage is good, but it only affects infantry and the damage obviously doesn't scale, whilst this scales with the power of your enemy units.
Something else to know about confusion really excels when there's multiple people playing the game. So for example, if you have 8-player games, confusion is absolutely impeccable in those situations. Because everyone just starts killing each other. It's fantastic.
So all of the abilities are here. I would suggest you read over them. As I mentioned before, will not be going over commanders and details or their abilities. This video is already like over an hour long, and we're basically through half of it. So yeah, so Demon Prince, tier 3 possession, good health, has, demonic roar to break morale and get kind of, if it's surrounded by a swarm, to get some enemies off it. It also has a special attack that it sometimes does, which does a nice AoE, so that's cool as well. And it can't cast any of the other abilities, that's important to note, but it can cast the rituals. And the rituals for the Demon Prince are not the same. They are a more powerful version of the Chaos Sorcerer rituals. So if you're able to get them, get the Demon Prince and cast the ritual from the Demon Prince rather than the Chaos Sorcerer. It's not necessary, the buff is not that significant, but it is a good little tidbit to know.
Something else to know as well, that if you do upgrade your Chaos Sorcerer to the Demon Prince, and then kill him because you want to get rid of the ritual that you have access to, you do need to research the Demon Prince research.
Yes. These researches need to be redone when the unit dies. Or sorry, not even when the unit dies, when you use the possession. So these are once off. So I use the possession, as you can see it's gone. Now I actually let it be possessed. And as you can see, this is back. I can't research it right now because there's already a unit out on the Demon Prince is out on the field, but once it dies, I'll need to research this again in order to get the Demon Prince back. Okay, and I think that's everything for base CSM.
Yep.
So let me get rid of all these units. And now let's start going through the subfactions. So subfactions, you can pick 2 at any given time. You cannot pick opposite gods. So if you're favoring World Eaters, you can't favor Emperor's Children because one serves Khorne, the other serves Lanesh. If you're favoring Death Guard, you can't pick Thousand Suns because one serves Nurgle, the other serves Tzeentch. But you can go Khorne, Nurgle, or you can go Khorne, Tzeentch, etc., etc. So there's a few different combinations there. So first let's deal with Khorne. in terms of units, let me quickly get into tier 1 because that's when things start happening. So in tier 1, Khorne gets the Death Brigade. This is your somewhat more expensive but more powerful version of the Renegades or Cultists, where they have a decent weapon variety, but their main thing is that they are good at both ranged and melee, and they have more health, where as you can see 5 models of these guys has 1200 health, the 4 models of these guys has 2000s, and they're still relatively cheap, where these cost 25, these cost 30 and 5.
The way I see the Death Brigade versus the Renegades are great at disrupting, like we spoke about with the mortars. Yeah. The Death Brigade, on the other hand, are actually very good at killing commanders because they have access to the sniper rifle. And it does quite a lot of damage. Yeah. You'd be surprised for being such a cheap unit.
So, speaking of which, if you're looking at these upgrades and you're wondering how the hell to get them, this is where the Sacrificial Circle comes in, where as you pick a subfaction, these researches will appear, and these researches correspond to the units on their tier. So this research will buff the tier 1 Khorne units, this will buff the tier 2 Khorne units, this will buff the tier 3 Khorne units. So for the Death Brigade, what this research will do is that it will enable the leader and most of the weaponry. So let me quickly get an armory and let me get the... So yeah, so the flamer you can get without it, the other weapons are enabled by it. So let me quickly go through the weapons. Flamer, standard stuff, grenade launcher already explained, plasma gun already explained, melta-gun already explained, sniper rifles, Avenge just talked about this, where this is your Khorne anti-commander. If you need to deal with commanders, get Death Brigade with snipers, they will absolutely mulch them. And keep in mind that these guys have a good baseline melee, which gets better as they get their sergeant. So before getting this upgrade, let's talk about the other units that benefits from it. You may note, some of these units are actually replacements for existing ones, rather than being straight additions. So the Testudo Transport is replacing the Rhino. This transport is faster, it has the same abilities, but it has weapon upgrades enabled by the research. Heavy Flamer, which does AoE and gives you anti-structure damage as well, and Autocannon, which is your generalist weapon, but this is what you do if you need a little bit of extra anti-structure or anti-vehicle damage without AoE.
After the upgrade, it also comes with an aura, right? If I'm not mistaken? The transport?
Yes. Yes, so the Testudo Transport will also provide a melee damage reduction aura for the transport. Philosophy being that most Khorne units want to get into melee with enemies, and melee enemies are going to be the major thing that will cause you damage because you'll tie them up, and so, you know, melee aura will make you a bit better at that. So let's get the upgrade. And let's get the Sergeant real quick. Yeah, and the Sergeant also, like most Sergeants and Aspiring Champions, it gives it the Fury ability, which squad does more damage but takes more damage. That's pretty standard for CSM. So, as you can see, this transport can hold 4 units, which is insane for tier 1. It is really powerful. And it also gets its weapons. Anything else to say about either of those units?
No. I think we've covered everything with the Death Brigade. They are very, very powerful tier 1 unit.
Yeah. So, moving into tier 2. Quickly grab this. We have... So, also, let's quickly talk about the other things that happen when you pick a subfaction. So, first of all, Cultists get worship. The worship of Khorne and there will be a Worship of Nurgle here when we go Nurgle. We'll come back to these when we get them, when we get Nurgle. Champion of Khorne, this is your secondary commander, similar to something like a Force Commander or for Space Marines. Again, commanders are their own separate thing. I recommend you just play around them by yourself, see how you feel about them. What else? Walls, as I mentioned before, when you get this add-on, they get extra abilities as well. So, yeah, abilities here. And I think that's about it for general changes that come from picking a god for now. Tell me if you can think of anything else.
No, I think that's for now. If we want to get into detail about the worship later, as we've already said, it's very, very powerful timed ability. So we can talk about that later.
Yeah. So, Khorne Berserkers. Powerful melee unit. So again, if you have some transports alive in tier 2, you get some berserkers in there, you send it in, you get them out, and it's an absolute bloodbath, which is exactly how they would want it. And then the other unit is the Berserker Dreadnought, where this is a purely melee Dreadnought. It has absolutely no ranged weapons whatsoever, but it is very powerful in melee, and it has decent damage versus everything, so it's not like you have to specialize or send it against certain targets. You just send it out there and it will absolutely mulch enemies. As for the upgrade, so this one buffs the health, the speed of the... so enables leader recruitment, and buffs the health and speed of the Berserker Dreadnought, making it easier to get in there and tankier, and also gives both of the units Blood Frenzy. So let's do this real quick.
Blood Frenzy is a fun ability.
Yeah. So first of all, as you can see, these guys also gained, I'm not sure if those ones in the description, but they also gained the basically Fear ability if you've ever played Necrons. Similar thing where units in an area will flee from them for a few seconds. Very good disruption. And Blood Frenzy. You lose control of the unit, but you gain various combat buffs. If you've ever played Chaos Demons, you would have seen this on Khorne units for Chaos Demons as well. Very, very strong. You get these guys into combat, and you don't really need to control your units anyway, so you just pop this. They're better at doing their thing. But obviously the downside of if, oh shit, my unit is suddenly dying, and I don't have control over it, well, sucks to be you. And same thing here, where you do need to be careful of when you pop it, but if you pop it at the right time, it will absolutely destroy everything in its path. So, I think that's it for Tier 2.
Yep.
So let's move on to Tier 3, and let me also send a Cultist out to capture a crit, so we can go Tier 5. Okay, so Tier 3, Khorne Terminators. Can you guess what they do?
Oh boy.
These were in the game before full transparency. These aren't new with this update, but they have gotten some minor changes. So, melee Terminators, no ranged weaponry whatsoever. Are you seeing a theme? And they can get some weapon upgrades and their sergeant as well with the research. Doomblaster, not a melee unit, surprisingly, it being Khorne. This is an artillery piece. Let me show you. Long range, fires, and just, yeah. So this is mostly a disruption weapon where it does actual damage versus vehicles and titans, and it won't do much damage versus everything else, but it will be disrupting enemy infantry because it does have knockback as well. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure every subfaction had is that they, no matter what combination of gods you went for, that you had a anti-Titan unit, whatever combination you go with Khorne, whether it's Khorne Nurgle or Khorne Tzeentch, this is your anti-Titan. If you see enemy Titans and you're like, crap, I need to get some vehicle stuff to deal with it, this is the relic vehicle that you go for. And obviously these Terminators will do good damage. The Twin Axes will do okay damage to Titans. The Lightning Claws I don't think will. They have the anti-demon specialization. But yeah. So yeah, speaking of which, the other thing that most subfactions needed to have is some sort of anti-demon specialization as well, and this is it. Lightning Claws, good demon, and being melee, they will be good versus living metal as well, just for the fact of being melee. Most melee is good versus living metal. So yeah.
When it comes to playstyle wise with the Khorne Terminators as well, do you have like a how to get in, out kind of, or is it just teleport in and bash skulls?
So the best way that I would recommend is to reinforce the unit, get all of its weapons that you want, or if you don't want to get weapons, because I think these weapons are pretty fast to reinforce, at least get all of the units and the sergeant, put it back into the Chaos Temple, and when the fight starts, teleport them on top of where they need to be. That way, you still have 2 teleports to readjust and teleport out when need be. I think that's the best way to do it, or use a Land Raider to transport them up. Basically, using your teleports to get in whilst decent is risky, so I would suggest any other mode of transport. That's what Deep Strike is for. In Tier 3 you also have the Warp Forge, and obviously they can teleport from the Deep Strike from the Chaos Temple, so I would recommend those options. So
no, there we go. Yeah, I was just about to ask for that one.
Yeah. So as for this one, so enables the leader and weapons for the Khorne Terminators and halves the reload time for the artillery for the Doom Blaster. So let me show you. That's the speed right now. 2, 3, 4, 1. So every 4 seconds. Once I get this, every 2 seconds. It is quite fun.
Yeah. Something else they get.
Mm-hmm.
They get Blood Frenzy, right?
Pretty sure with their sergeant. Yes, they get Blood Frenzy with their sergeant. So it's not directly stated, but yeah, their sergeant gives them the Blood Frenzy ability as well. So similar to the other use cases of Blood Frenzy, get them in to the right spot, pop Blood Frenzy, watch them destroy things.
Even more so with the Terminators, they are very powerful. They're strong, very strong.
Okay, so let's go over Nurgle. So again, you get Champion of Nurgle. So we'll go over the Subfaction units and then we'll go over all the other features. So the units. Assault Plague Marines, this is your, and as you can see the roster has now been fully filled out. So this is your melee, Tier 1 melee infantry, where if you're in Tier 1, you either didn't get Raptors or they died, this is the infantry you want to go for. They're still good into Tier 2. Tier 3, they start falling off and you're better off using Terminators or other units. So, as for what they do, being Nurgle, most Nurgle units have some kind of debuff upon enemies on attack. That's just a general flavor of Nurgle, where they debuff enemies. So, yeah, they have Fumigating Smoke ability, suffer morale damage, and have reduced vision for enemies. And they have a bunch of weapons that we'll get to when we get the upgrade. As for the Nurgle unit, Desecrator, this is a Tier 1 version of the Defiler, where it has the same Desecration ability. It has a twin link glass cannon as it can get on its side instead of the whatever weapon is on there right now. And the main thing is that it's tanky for Tier 1. Keep in mind, this is a Tier 1 unit, Tier 1 vehicle, armored vehicle, with 5,000 health, and I think a little bit of natural regen, being Nurgle. despite being a vehicle, it can regen its own health.
Important to note, after seeing the Defiler earlier, the Defiler is significantly quicker.
Yes,
movement speed.
it is also slow.
The Desecrator is very slow.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it is slow, but it is very tanky, so that's the idea. It's tanky, it's slow, this is your vehicle frontline.
Yeah.
So, let's get rid of the corn units, they're getting in the way. Okay, so next up we have the Plague Marines. This have been in the game for a while. Oopsie, that did not get fixed. We'll need to get that fixed. Cool, well, a few things I'm learning that will need to get fixed when I'm going through the VOD. So, yeah, so in general, this is your tanky melee infantry. Think of this as the tier 2 replacement of the CSM, where they're tanky, they have some debuffing things going on as well, and they have some interesting weapons to choose from as well, which we'll go through after... Oh right, we forgot to go through the research. Let's go through the research for the first guys. So this enables weapons for these guys, where the weapons have different specializations. This is anti-commander, executes low health enemies. This is anti-structure and living metal and has knockback. And this does not apply a debuff and does straight up damage. And it's good versus Titans. All three have different specializations, Demons and Titans, sorry. All three have different specializations, and they also gain a jump. Where, as you can see, this jump has a little bit of a delay, but just having a jump on a relatively slow squad of infantry could be quite powerful. And they also get the Fury ability with their sergeant.
Sorry if you haven't already said, the fumigating smoke as well.
Yes, I mentioned it when we talked about them before.
Oh, apologies.
Yeah, no worries.
Zone.
So for the Desecrator, it gets the twin linked last cannon and also a belching vomit ability, which does an AoE. Unfortunately, there's an actual the belch coming out. There's no animation for that, but it does damage in a cone, knocking back and damaging enemy units. Relatively quick cooldown and quite powerful, so this is your melee AoE, where obviously you can turn on Desecration if you want to deal with swarms at range, but if the swarms are close in, or if you're running into an enemy range swarm, for example, popping this on the enemy will deal a lot of damage. So yeah, as for tier... No, these are the assault. As for tier 2, they get the Plague Burst Crawler. This is your artillery piece, where it sits in the back, it has a long range, it shoots at enemies. So, for the upgrade, extra weaponry for the Plague Marines and Plague Burst Crawler, a recruitment of the Plague Marines, and the corrosion ability for the Plague Burst Crawler. So it starts off at just different decent infantry structures and morale damage. And after the upgrade, these guys gain all of their weaponry, and let's get their sergeant as well. So Toxic Sprayer, this is basically a better version of the Flamer, where it does everything that the Flamer does, plus gives them a kind of damage over time to enemies. Plasma Gun, we went through many Plasma Guns. Melta Gun, same thing. Rad Launcher, similar idea to Grenade Launcher, but also applies, I think, a slowing and damage over time effect. And Plague Spewer. This is a AoE versatile weapon, where it will do decent damage to everything, but it also has a good AoE, and it has long range. Yeah, it's an interesting use case. I don't know. Do you want to talk about it?
It's yeah. So for me, with my my experience now with Nurgle, is I've been playing, like I said earlier in the video, I've had quite a lot of hands-on with both Nurgle and Khorne, and well, CSM in general. With I'm not sure which one it is. It's either the Rad Launcher or the Plague Spear. You can only have a max limit of 2 regardless of weapon cap.
Yes, I believe it is the Plague Spear. Let me double check. Ooh, it disables the rest of them as well. That's weird. We'll need to fix that. Oh, there's only 2 models. I'm dumb. Okay, yeah. Oh no, you can get all of them. Are you sure it's not?
I thought it was one or the other, whether it might have been Rad Launcher or Plague Spear.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Rad Launcher has a limit of 2 weapons. My bad. Yeah, I misunderstood.
Right,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Rad Launcher.
So it's an interesting use case because although the Rad Launchers are really good, like you touched on, having them as like a grenade launcher, but they also do apply effects as they are Nurgle to enemy units, you can only have 2 of them. So what tends to happen if you're not micromanaging your units 100% is that you'll end up, because the Rad Launcher is so far range, you'll only end up with 2 units firing. So you need to really play around that if you want to have Rad Launchers. Typically what I've done is use them as a backline, teleporting in your Assault Plague Marines and then pushing forward, ignoring the weapon ranges, and then using, for example, Plague Spear, as it does do a lot of damage. You can kind of think of it like a flamer, but it kind of does more damage.
Yes.
And not as much, it doesn't really affect morale. It's more so a
damage dealer, yeah.
A damage dealer. It's almost like a spewing poison, you could say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So far, for the Plague Burst Crawler, these upgrades, something to note, they don't actually buff its main artillery. These are side weapons. So instead of this kind of belcher, which basically Nurgle Flamer on the sides, it gives it entropy cannons, which can be thought of similar to something like Volkite, where it's just good damage versus everything, and the Rawtail Volley Gun as well, which also has good damage versus everything. So it's interesting because this turns what's just a artillery piece with a few okay close range weapons to a unit where there's actually a use case for, instead of using the artillery on the Plague Burst Crawler, running it in closer and using its side weapons. I don't know if you want to talk more about that.
Well, no, I haven't actually used it like that. That's why I was saying it's interesting. The way I've viewed it is after getting these upgrades, typically with a lot of other factions that you play, take IG for example, you could get a Basilisk. Now playing against IG, I would typically send something in, like just to deal with the Basilisk quickly. Yeah. Now, after you get these upgrades, it actually proves quite difficult to even kill it up close because it has.
Yes, this is also defense on the other thing, where you can use it in close range against enemies, but it also provides you a defense from getting your artillery sniped. Yeah,
which is typically how I would play it. I would play it like
that is a valid way to play
artillery. I'll go and destroy them. Now it's actually quite difficult. This unit has defensive and offensive capabilities as as artillery.
Yep, that is probably the wider use case. I just wanted to point out that, you know, if you can defend using these upgrades, you can also attack using these upgrades.
100%.
So, as for the last few units, Blightlord Terminators, these are tanky ranged Terminators that, as always, being Nurgle, reduce enemy, like poison enemies upon attacks. So we'll go through their weaponry when we get the upgrade, and the last unit is the Plague Reaper. This unit has also been in the game for a while. It's also something of an artillery piece, but it does mostly damage to infantry and commanders, as you can see by its description, where it will not do much damage versus Titans, vehicles, stuff like that. It's mostly ranged anti-infantry. So yeah. You can think of it as similar to a Bane Blade, but even more infantry focused. As for the upgrade, this one is interesting, where it provides leaders and weapons for the Nurgle Terminators, but for the Plague Reaper, it allows it to be deep striked from the Warforge, a la IG players being able to deep strike Baneblades.
Mm-hmm.
One thing to note, this will, because of the way that Soulstone works, this will unfortunately only apply to Plague Reapers that are built after you get this upgrade. So if you want to get Plague Reapers, and if you care about being able to deep strike them, get this first, then get the Plague Reapers. So let's get it in show. So as you can see, right now, can't do anything with the Warforge. Let me delete it and get a new one. As you can see, it can go into the Warforge. So, let's quickly go over the Blightlord Terminators. Its weapons. So, Plague Spear, we already talked about this one. Weird that it has no icon here, but it has an icon here. Okay, that was just missed. Okay, cool. So we'll just need to copy that icon over to the other thing. Anyway, so yeah, Plague Spear, we talked over what it does. Similar idea, but now on Terminators. Twin autocannon, we've talked about autocannons, good damage versus all, medium range, just generally good versus everything weapon, and Blight launchers, and I'm pretty sure these ones are not limited to 2. Not limited to 2, so if you want to go full Blight launcher, this is what you get them on. And I'm pretty sure because they're Terminators, they do not have a setup time on these weapons like you would if you were to try to get, for example, the rad launchers on the Plague Marines. So that's another benefit as well, where you don't need to set them up. You can run them around, and as soon as they stop, they'll fire, or they'll even fire on the move.
Something to know, although it should be self-implied, but just to go over it again. We've spoke about twin autocannons, and we've mentioned how Nurgle has this theme of applying debuffs, but with the twin autocannon, due to its fire rate and everything else, you apply those debuffs. Like, do they stack?
The debuffs do all stack, as far as I know, yeah.
Yeah, so in that case, it even makes the Terminators that much better. Like, increases DPS time due to the fact it doesn't have setup, faster fire rate weapons, they're very, very versatile and good units.
Yeah. And one thing to note, if you look at comparison of the 4 models plus Sergeant, the Blightlord Terminators have the most health by a significant margin, and they also have higher regen because Nurgle. So they're very tanky as far as Terminators go, but they are also slow. Yeah, I think that's everything for Nurgle. Oh yeah, just show this. Hey, look at that, it's actually deep striking. It wasn't deep striking before, there was an issue where it would just get stuck in the building.
Oh.
Yeah, so yeah, there we go. Deep striking Plague Reapers.
Very nice.
So, with all of the units gone over, let's go over some of the other special features. Well, there's also some upgrades, but let's start going over the special features. So first of all, the warships. So warships of Khorne and Slaanesh are buffs to you. Warship of Nurgle and Tzeentch are debuffs to enemies. And obviously you can only click one of these at a time because your unit becomes disabled for the time that stuff is going on. So this will increase the damage of all units in a large area, and this will decrease enemy movement speed and armor in a very large area. Note that the debuffs on enemies are a larger area than the buffs on allies. That's an important thing to know. So yeah, so when we go to the other side, we'll also go over the other two, but the basic idea, the button that will be here, so Khorne or Slaanesh, because they're opposites, will be a buff to you. The button that will be here will be a debuff to enemies. Just an intuitive way to do that. So as for the wall, increases your unit's damage in a large area around it. Again, similar idea, and decreases enemy speed and armor. So similar idea to the worships on the Cultists. As you can see, they're actual Cultists worshipping the walls. Thank you, Kakulis. This is freaking amazing. I love this. But yeah, so similar idea to the ones here. but on the walls instead. Okay. So with that, let's move on to these guys. So you can only get one of these at a time, but they share their upgrades. So if you get upgrades on one, they will transfer to the other, but you have to pick and choose which one you want, which hero you want, and you're able to possess them. One cool thing to note is that Champion of Khorne can be possessed to turn into a Bloodthirster. But when you do so, this becomes enabled again. And you can also get the Champion of Nurgle. So you could get the Champion of Nurgle, get this, and turn this guy into a Great Unclean One. So Bloodthirster, big melee beat stick, yeah, has a nice ability to drain life from enemies, has a lot of health, has a jump, good melee damage, and relatively quick. Great Unclean One has some nice AoE abilities and is very tanky, as you can tell, and has high regen, no jump, and is relatively slow. Anything else to add on these guys?
No, not until we get into the...
Tier 5? Tier 5.
Yeah.
Oopsie. Did not mean to put you there. Let's get the Desecrated Castle. Let's go tier 5, because there are 2 more researches for Subfactions that we haven't talked about yet, which are these 2. Greatly buffs the Bloodthirster, greatly buffs the Great Unclean One. So let's get the Bloodthirster one. So first of all, doubles its health, which is very nice. Keep in mind this is without getting all of the hero levels, because these guys will benefit from hero levels since you can only get 1 of each. And yeah, you can see these are now disabled. And it gives it Frenzying Roar, which is the lose control but buff combat, but for all friendly units in an area around the Bloodthirster, which is very nice, especially if you jump him in with some Khorne Terminators, and you just, whenever this ability runs out, or if this ability is in cooldown, you pop this, and all of the Khorne Terminators go absolutely berserk. It's really fun. Okay.
Yeah. Would like to also just quickly point that these upgrades are really expensive, right?
Yes, each one of them costs as much as going tier 5, but they're also appropriately powerful, where, as you can see, it's now way faster, the ability is powerful, its weapon is way stronger, and it has double the health.
Yep.
Which will scale with the hero levels as well, because those are multiplicative. So as for the Great Unclean One, nothing much, ton of health, ton of regen, a little bit faster weapons. I deliberately kept these researches somewhat simple, because if you can tell by all the abilities, CSM are a lot. Like, they are a lot in terms of abilities and stuff like that, so I wanted these guys to be relatively simple, unless you go Tzeentch. But if you go Tzeentch, you're asking to just press a lot of abilities, so that's fine. So yeah, I think that is it. So this is the last third of your uber late game, where you have the sacrifices, you have the Desecrated Castle being able to spam nukes left and right, and then you have these guys as well, and their researches. And that's all of those in combinations make up your tier 5, where you can choose to, well, you'll probably do either the sacrifices or the upgrade to these guys first when you go tier 5, and then build up your Desecrated Castle, because that's way more expensive and is slower, and each ability will cost like as much as one of these upgrades. But yeah, that's your scaling in the late game. Yeah, anything else to add before we move on to Slaanesh and Tzeentch?
No, I don't think so. I think for now, I think that's a good coverage.
So, let's go through Slaanesh first. Moritat Kill Team, my favorite unit. I absolutely adore these guys. I love them. if you've played Sisters of Battle, these are Seraphim. They
I love them.
They can fire on the move without losing barely any accuracy. They have good melee. They do some gun kata in melee. It's really fun to watch. They have a nice flavor to make if you want morale or anti-infantry damage, and they have the Volkite pistols, which we'll go over in a second. As for the vehicle unit, where's the vehicle building? Oh, you're all the way back here. Sonic Scorpion, also a fun little unit.
It's a baby
Dreadnought,
brass scorpion.
yeah, baby brass scorpion, very quick, does a lot of morale damage as well. Infantry, good infantry damage, good morale damage, very fast. So if dreadnoughts are too slow and you need like a melee unit to disrupt the enemy, or just, you know, rush into an enemy backline, this is your unit to go for. Like, look at that speed, look at its move. And speaking of speed, so yeah, this enables 2 additional troops. So this is because they don't have a leader. These guys don't have a leader, so instead of enabling a leader, you get 2 additional troops. And gives the Sonic Scorpion some extra abilities, and the Noise Moritat team some extra abilities. So let's get it. So 2 extra models, and then they can get the Volkite pistols. These are very slow to reinforce. As you can see, they are very slow, but they are very powerful when you do get a squad fully upgraded with them, because they do good damage versus everything, and it's actually good damage for their tier. So, yeah. And they also get the combat drugs. So this will be a common ability for Emperor's Children. If you know, you know. I won't go into it. But yeah, the unit cannot die. This is basically immunity to death, similar to Sisters as well. Can you guess where I took my inspiration from? Where the unit cannot die or take morale damage. It increases its speed and reduces reload time. But after the ability runs out, the unit will lose health for a few seconds. So if you put this unit into combat, and if you pop this ability and the unit is at 1 health and you jump it out at the last second and then the ability expires, it will still die. You need to give it a few seconds after disengaging in order for the unit to not actually die, or you can keep them in combat and just be like, fuck it, if they die, they die. Just kind of go out in a blaze of glory kind of deal. Yeah. Anything else to say about them?
Nope. Nope.
So,
no.
Sonic Scorpion. 2 abilities. Dazzling Dance. Increases speed, attack speed, damage, and damage resistance for a while. So no downside. This is just you move even quicker for a bit. So this is what you use to get into combat. So then it gives damage resistance and speed. This is what you run in with. And then Piercing Scream, somewhat similar to the Desecrator, where a conal AoE in front of it, knocking back and damaging enemy units. This does. So the other one would poison, this one would do more morale damage kind of deal.
Yeah.
So I think that is it for tier 1. So let's move on to tier 2. Noise Marines. Similar to Plague Marines, you can think of this somewhat as a replacement for Chaos Space Marines, but less versatile, where they start off with AoE weapons, kind of. Think of it as starting off with heavy flamers. They're not actually heavy flamers, I don't know what they're called, but they do kind of an AoE attack in front of them. Very good versus swarms. If you're ever facing demons and you're playing Slanesh, well, first of all, if you're facing demons, go Slanesh, full stop, just do it. And second of all, get these guys. They do good morale damage, and they do it in an AoE, which absolutely destroys demons. And then the other unit is the Sonic Warp Speeder. This is an interesting one. It is fast, as you can see, very quick on its feet, as most of Slanesh is. And when it stands still, it goes invisible. So, very, very interesting unit. Can do a lot of shenanigans with like ambushes or running around, dealing with a key target and then running into a corner and going invisible so that the enemy can't find you, kind of deal. Interesting stuff. It gets even more interesting when you get the upgrade. So leader and combat trucks for the Noise Marines, and jump for the warp speeder, giving it even more mobility, and weapons for both squads. So Blastmaster, decent AoE damage versus everything, and particularly good damage versus structures. I'm not sure if the champion gives them anything. Yeah, so the champion gives them Berserk Fury and Dupe Siren, which will demoralize enemies around it. And they also get the combat drugs, which we just went to. This being a ranged unit, you can actually use this for the speed and reduced reload time rather than not being able to die, because they're a backline unit, especially with the Blastmasters. So you don't expect them to take much damage. For the Sonic Warp Speeder, it can get all 3 weapons, and all 3 of these weapons buff it in an interesting way. So it starts off being, with all of its weapons being good versus infantry and heavy infantry, and then you can choose to get these weapons to specialize, where Heavy Flamer will just do good damage to infantry and structures and morale in an AoE. Blastmaster, again, setup time, a bit of an AoE and good anti-structure, and Missile Launcher for good anti-vehicle. So before, it was a kind of ambush anti-infantry unit. Now you can use this to sneak into enemy bases and destroy key targets, or snipe down key vehicles, or just disrupt the enemy from interesting angles. It's a fun unit. I've had a lot of fun
with that unit. Yeah, I was just about to say I've had a lot of fun with that unit, especially
it's a really fun unit. It's kind of similar to Raven Guard in some ways, where it also has a lot of sneaky shenanigans.
Yeah. You can draw quite a few examples there.
Yeah. So, next up, we have the Phoenix Guard Terminators. These are fast Terminators. They are quick. They start off with the blast weapons, the Blastmasters, and a decent fist. So they start off with decent melee and okay range damage. Their main power comes from the upgrades that they can get, which we'll go over now, after I get the last unit, which is the Landgrifter. So if you've ever played Space... Yeah, I know, it's fast. So if you've ever... this is similar to the Land Raider Helios. It's a Land Raider. It has a good transport capacity. It has the artillery battery at the top, but it also has some good last cannon weapons on its sides, which give it some good anti-vehicle damage as well. So yeah, so the artillery is good at disruption and versus infantry, and the last cannons are the thing that's good versus structures and demons and stuff like that. Okay, so its main thing, as you probably noticed, it's ridiculous top speed. It's ridiculous, well, both acceleration and top speed. Like, look at how quickly it turned around and how quickly it accelerated. Like, it is very, very quick, which makes it kind of a dual purpose, where you could use it as your artillery. It won't be as good as the Doom Blaster, but it'll still be decent artillery. Or you could use it as run in there, transport units in, do some damage when you get low, pop this ability, get the hell out.
It is a lot of fun to use.
Yes, it is. It is probably my second favorite unit. It is so much fun.
From Emperor's Children.
Yeah. Well, just in general from the rework. I love my speed stuff, so yeah.
Yeah. No, they are fun.
Yeah. So, the leader and combat drugs for the Phoenix Guard, and the Landgrifter gets 2 auras, buffing allies and debuffing enemies, which supports its run in the middle of everything, do some damage, do some disruption, and get the hell out kind of playstyle. So again, make use of its speed. Yes, it has an artillery weapon. Yes, that artillery weapon is okay, but if you're just using it to occasionally shell enemies with a missile battery, you're not using the unit to its full potential. Sometimes that's what you need to do, and this is, you know, decent for that, but yeah. Okay, so as for the Phoenix, they get the Volkite Cannon, which again, good damage versus everything, and the Power Glaive, also good damage versus everything. This is just, what do you want to specialize in? Do you want this to be a range damage unit or a melee damage unit? If you want range damage, you go this. If you want melee damage, you go this. So yeah, so Volkite Cannon, you get this if you want to do some good range, if you want this unit to specialize in ranged, and Power Glaive if you want to specialize in melee. Both have relatively similar pens. The melee weapon will do more damage because being in melee is more risky, so that's the trade-off. And the ranged weapons will just be safer. But yeah, as you can see, for Terminators, they are very quick. They have the combat drugs as well to make them even quicker. They have a jump, and their leader starts off with the Power Glaive and the special cannon as well. So keep that in mind. Okay.
They're probably, sorry, I just thought about this, but they're probably the closest to the standard Terminators, not as versatile due to the fact they just don't have as many options in the weaponry. But out of all of the Subfaction Terminators, I'd probably say that the Phoenix Guard, other than how fast they are, is the closest to the standard Terminators.
Yeah.
In terms of usage, I guess.
Yep. They are, if you don't know what you want to go for, you go for Phoenix Guard Terminators. They are your jack of all trades. So, yep, Land Grifter was already explained, so let's go on to Thousand Suns. So, Axios Coven. This is a fast melee attack unit, which, with its main feature being that it will get some interesting abilities once you get the leader. By itself, it's just fast, it moves around quickly, it does good melee damage, okay range damage, but mostly I would recommend using them in melee. As for the range, Hellblade. So this replaces the Hell Talon, and it has a different pen scheme where instead of being, I think it was anti-structure, was it? This one is primarily anti-infantry with okay damage versus everything else.
Yeah, I think the Talon is vehicle and structure, right? Or just structure. Yeah.
So they have these twin Gatling guns on them. I don't know if I can zoom in on them. God. Air units are so weird to zoom in on. But yeah, they have these twin kind of autocannon-esque things, which do really good anti-infantry damage. So if you want anti-infantry aircraft, here's the thing. Because, you know, some infantry have trouble dealing with aircraft, and it being relatively quick and with a jump can make it quite versatile in those situations. Similar to Raven Guard again, if you go for the... oh, what was it? Not important. Okay.
You're going to get me thinking about it again now. I'm going to try and think about what you're thinking about.
Okay, so as for the research, it enables the recruitment of a leader and enables the jump for the Praxis Coven, and gives some extra abilities to the Hellblade. So Tzeentch in general will have a few more abilities to manage than other subfactions. That's just how Tzeentch rolls. Its main feature that you get from picking it is ability recharge rate. So as for this guy, it gets the biotoxin bomb, similar to the way the Hell Talon did. You drop this on enemies, it does damage. And it also gets emergency evasion, which is your click this when this unit is about to die button, where you click it, it takes less damage, but it isn't as fast, so you'll need to kind of try to get it out of danger. relatively simple. As for the Practicus Coven, I always say them wrong. Apologies if I have said their name wrong, by the way. I do not know how to pronounce this.
Practicus?
Practicus, yeah. I always forget the T for some reason. So yeah, so these guys, each aspiring sorcerer, when you get them, will provide with Doombolt, Warp Time, which increases their accuracy. So that gives them a little bit more of a... Well, their melee accuracy isn't perfect either, so this will buff their melee damage, but it will buff their range damage more. So keep that in mind.
Yep.
And Befoul, this is the ability that you get these guys for. You can disable a building and increase the damage that it takes. That is amazing. You can disable a listening post and chunk it down with a few squads of units. You can jump into the enemy base and disable their one production structure, meaning they can't produce any more units. This is insanely powerful in the right hands.
Yep.
So, yeah, moving on to Tier 2, Rubric Marines. Another replacement for the Chaos Space Marines. Are you seeing a theme? These ones start off, they are slow, they are tanky, and yeah, that's about it. Infantry, they do have natural anti-vehicle pen, which is interesting and something to keep in mind. So, Tier 2, Deceiver, another alternative to the Defiler. As with the Defiler, good melee. So this one is mostly melee, where it does have some range damage, specifically from its flamers, but you mostly want to use this in melee.
Yep.
Yeah. So with the upgrades, enables leader and weapons for the Rubric Marines, and Deceiver gets Defilers. As you can see, a lot of power in Siege is coming from the abilities and not buffing the units themselves or giving them weapons, that kind of thing, which was true for most of the other factions. So, enables the Sergeant, which gives them the Bolt of Change and Warp Time as well.
The Aspiring Sorcerer.
Yep. And Inferno Bolts as well, which gives them extra damage versus a few other pens. Mostly this is a straight up upgrade to their weapons, it's just something that you get on them when you get them, as many as you can. And one thing to note, they have a big squad size. So unlike the Noise Marines, which can go up to 7, and the Chaos Space Marines, which can also go up to 7, Rubric Marines can go up to 11 models.
Very big difference.
Yes. Well, 10 if you don't count the leader, because I think the leader was counted in here, but yeah, 10 models is big.
Oh yeah, so not including the bearer or leader, right? Yeah, 10, yeah.
Yeah, 10 without the
Gotcha.
bearer or leader, yeah. Well, these guys are... Pretty sure these guys are 6 without the leader, yeah.
Yep.
6, 7, 10. So that's also a big thing, where that will obviously increase your damage just by having more models in a squad. So, Beguiling Whispers. So this is another AoE thing, but this one is different, where it will not do much damage, but the enemies hit by it in a cone, so in front of it, will lose control for a few seconds and attack its allies. And this persists for a little bit after you send it out. Quite an interesting ability, where instead of dealing damage, it just disrupts the enemy. And Winds of Change, Psychic Storm around all enemies in an area will get knocked back. This is your get off me AoE, where if you're swarmed by enemy units, because again, it doesn't have much AoE on it, this is what you do to get the enemies away from you. Also very powerful if you run into an enemy blob, because you can again just disrupt them. So, anything else to say on those guys?
No, not on those units.
Okay. So, moving into Tier 3. Also some of the most interesting units.
Oh god, this one is big.
Is big, yeah. Crucible Terminators, another melee Terminator. So this one comes out of the gate with just good damage versus everything with its hammers, and being hammers and melee, they're particularly good versus stuff like living metal. We should probably fix the description or change the description of them to specify that, but yeah. And then their weapons, they don't really buff their melee, but they give them a mixed role where instead of being purely melee, they will also do good range damage as well. And Silver Tower, this is the equivalent of the also has transport capacity, which is cool. Can only transport 2 units, but it's still cool. And so this is kind of Necron Monolithy-esque, where it does a good AoE attack, it has a nice little teleport, it can transport a few units, but the main difference is that it has actually really good melee. So its ranged is an AoE, so it will be good versus swarms of targets. But let's say if you're fighting a Titan, you get this guy and teleport him into melee with a Titan, and it will destroy it, and it will be able to chase the Titans so that it can't run away. So keep in mind, anti-swarm ranged, anti-single target melee. Both good in their own ways. So with the upgrade, leader and weapons for the Crucible Terminators, and damage and speed for the Silver Tower increased, making it even better. For the Crucible Terminators, you can get the Aspiring Sorcerer, and you can get these different bolts, where, as you can see, this one is particularly notable because it deals with aircraft, where for melee Terminators, aircraft can be an issue, so this will help deal with those. And this will deal with swarms, where again, hammers don't have much AoE and they're relatively slow in terms of damage because of their slow attack speed, so they're likely to overkill units. So having some amount of AoE to deal with low, like chaff infantry is good as well. And Chaos Sorcerer, Bolt of Change, Warp Time, so similar idea. As for Silver Tower, yeah, it's even faster. It does even, yeah, as you can see, it takes a while to speed up, but it's actually pretty quick once it's had its acceleration going, and it has more damage. So, yeah. Anything else to say on that?
No, not on these units. There is something I would like to touch on. I don't know if you're going to mention it, but it's the although we haven't done it for the other ones, like the champions, so the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, I'm sure we're going to get into that with their tier 5 upgrades. But something noteworthy, it shares all of the same upgrades as the standard Chaos Sorcerer. So all the spells and stuff like that.
Yep, we can go into that for a second. So, first of all, Cultists, Worship of Slaanesh, buffs your units. This one buffs movement speed and range, which is big. Like being able to buff your units' range, especially when Slaanesh has units like Noise Marines with their Blastmaster upgrade and stuff like that. Being able to increase their range is quite powerful, even for the Volkite pistols for these guys, giving them more chase potential is quite good. And then Tzeentch drains enemy morale. It's not a particularly fast drain, but keep in mind, I'm pretty sure these abilities are not global. Give me a second. Let me double check. So if I use one of these... Oh, it is global. Okay, I might need to increase its morale damage then, because I thought they weren't global. But yeah, anyway. So, yeah, does morale damage. Should do good morale damage. Does not do good morale damage right now, but I'll fix that for the release. and there's a small chance, I think it's like a 2% chance, that the unit will lose control and attack its allies instead, which is quite interesting as well. So the numbers of these will play played around, but the concept will remain the same, where they do morale damage and there's a small chance that the unit will lose control and attack its allies.
Makes sense.
So yeah, very shenanigansy, very Zinch.
Yeah.
So so let's get the Keeper of Secrets first, and then we can talk about the Zinch Sorcerer Lord. So Keeper of Secrets, possession from the Champion of Slaanesh. Very quick, does good damage, only does melee. So an interesting unit, but still relatively simple. This is your this will still be your front line, but this is a front line that you can easily pull back if it gets into trouble, while something like the Great Unclean One will be difficult to pull back once it gets low. Very maneuverable, can chase after and snipe individual targets. So you want to talk about the Chaos Sorcerer. Okay, so let's see. So, because I'm actually not 100% on this, if we were to use an ability like the Greater Bolt of Change on this guy. Yep, that's now on cooldown, and it's not on cooldown at this. So, yeah, so you basically get a duplicate. Also, that, holy shit, that does a lot of damage. Look at that, I nearly killed it.
Yeah.
So yeah, be careful with that. That does friendly fire.
There is one other thing to note as well, that the Zinch Chaos Sorcerer is far tankier.
Yes.
It's far more health.
This Chaos is squishier, this one is far tankier.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you basically get a duplicate of your, and keep in mind this one is also benefiting from all the war gears that you can get, which the Chaos Sorcerer doesn't have any war gear like this, so obviously doesn't benefit. So this one is, it's a sorcerer that can actually keep up in melee somewhat, unlike this one, which will just get absolutely mulched if it tries to get anywhere close to melee. So yeah, so you get a whole set of abilities that you need to manage as well if you want to go for him. And then when you upgrade it, you get the Lord of Change, who doesn't have as many abilities, but does have some really powerful ones.
Yeah.
So, Greater Bolt of Change, we've seen how much this does. Invulnerability, all units. Yeah. I think this should say all friendly units. I'll double check it, but I'm pretty sure it's all friendly units. Either all friendly or all of your units. I'm not sure which one.
I was confused about that. I've been meaning to ask you. I've completely forgotten. But yeah.
Yeah, so I'll check it and fix the description, but yeah, very powerful ability to just provide a global immunity to stuff. Winds of Change, powerful Psychic Storm, so this will push enemies around it. So this is your Get Off Me ability, where if you're surrounded by enemy units, you pop this, gets off you, and Mini Warp Storm, where just a bunch of AoE damage in that area. So interesting stuff on its own. So this is where, oh my god, how did I miss this? Another description that needs fixing. So many descriptions that need fixing, Jesus Christ. Yeah, so, okay. Sacrifices to Slaanesh, greatly buffs Keeper of Secrets. Pretty sure it doesn't give it any extra abilities. Nope, just even faster. Look at that speed. Look at this. It's ridiculous. Really fast, really high damage. Yeah. And the Lord of Change, this one is actually quite interesting, where it also significantly reduces its recharge. So if you'll see, that ability comes up a lot quicker than it did before. So you can just spam abilities like no tomorrow on this guy. I guess you can see this one is still slow, but it's not nearly as slow as it was before. So yeah, so if you have the APM to use all of your abilities, this is very powerful. Might actually be too powerful, because I think the invulnerability is still there by the effect, and the recharge is nearly offline. Huh. That might need a look.
It's fine.
Yes, make your entire army constantly invulnerable for forever. It's fine.
I'm not a CSM massive fan. I'm not biased.
Yes, you don't have a, any reason, any incentive to, make sure that CSM are super powerful.
Yeah, let's not talk about the aspiring sorceress.
Shh. For context, the aspiring sorcerer, especially the one that you would get on these Terminators, its weapon was bugged to where instead of executing enemies at 25% health, it just executed any enemy every 4 seconds. So that was fun.
I regretted to inform that.
So yeah, Lord of Change is also faster and does a bit more damage in melee, but you're not there primarily for his melee, you're there for spam abilities, so that's also fun. So I think that's it for Subfactions.
I think we've touched on everything, yeah. I think we've gone over every unit. Yeah.
So units, speed and range, and ability cooldown rate in an area. So this is a bit different from the one that's here, and that might be changed, that might not be changed, we'll have to see. I am fine with it in reducing cooldown rate because it's on a wall and it's a special upgrade that you need to get, but if this is too broken, we might have to change it, we'll see. So keep an eye out for the descriptions, where keep in mind the game is constantly changing and things that I say now may not be true half a year or a year from now, where things might have been changed, so always read the descriptions. So now we're done with the overview of the faction, and god, it's been like 2 hours, let's go and quickly go over some build orders and some. So I've recorded these 2 games where I played 1v1s versus 2 different harder AI. In the first one, I'll be showcasing a timing attack using Khorne and Nurgle, and the second one I'll be showcasing a timing attack using Slaanesh and Tzeentch. This will not be showcasing all of the units, it will only use a few of them. The idea is, if you can survive the early game with good economy and good map pressure, you can transfer that advantage later into the game as you would with any other faction. So the basic idea is this will provide you a baseline from which to build your own build orders and build into the later game. Because later into the game, things become way too complicated for build orders to remain a viable thing. You just have to kind of play it by ear. Yeah. Anything you want to say before we get in?
No. We're actually quite looking forward to seeing how, because we haven't actually played CSM against each other, so it's going to be quite interesting for me as well to see how you play CSM. Everyone's playstyle is so different, and one of the best things about this subfaction system is that there's so many different ways to play CSM.
Yeah.
Now, like we're touching on Khorne and Nurgle and Slaanesh and Tzeentch, but there are other combinations you can do there. Might be more niche here and there, but there's so many ways to play CSM now, so it's very
and also you're probably not going to use all the subfaction units at once, especially because there's 4 per tier. That's excluding the basic units that you get, so that also provides even more variation. Right. So the start is pretty basic. Cultist, Heretic, 3 Cultists, 2 Heretics. Starts with a barracks. I decided to start a squad of Raptors this game. You can also choose to start with CSM or Renegades if you want to go for tier 1 faster. Since I was playing Space Marines, I decided to go for Raptors for some early game pressure, because I know that without them, Space Marines can be a little bit difficult to deal with. So this is all relatively standard. One thing to note, the sacrificial pit, or whatever it's called, the sacrificial circle, that's what it's called. The upgrades for subfactions, they cost a lot of power, where the tier 1 one costs 200 power. That's a lot. So in order to get them, you need to go for generators early. So just some shenanigans going on over here. I went for this. As you can see, they went for a squad of tactical marines. Because I went Raptors, I was able to defend over here and then quickly jump over here as well. So yeah, that's that. Let's speed this up again. Alright, this video is over 2 hours long and I just want to get this done quickly. So upgrading listening posts. The enemy actually builds a decent army where it has a squad of assault marines, a squad of tactical marines, a bike, and some scouts. I can't fight this, but I keep my Raptors in there just to delay them for a bit, so that I can finish this listening post and get this listening post upgraded when I need to jump the Raptors out. So this is all relatively standard stuff. Get the armory so that when I'm in tier 1, I'm able to use the forced labor and to get the upgrades. Upgrading listening posts, getting the listening posts, standard stuff. So now I'm in tier 1. Straight away, Death Brigade and squad of assault plague marines. So I do something here that is kind of controversial, where I kill off my cultists in order to free up the pop cap, because I lost some Raptors early and had to reinforce units, so I don't want to spend the requisition on getting more population cap. This is debatable, where obviously you want to keep a few squads of cultists around for the worship and stuff, but I thought it was necessary this game in order to get the units out quicker. I don't know, what thoughts?
I mean, it does vary. Like for me, it really depends on like the map size. It depends on the enemies you're playing against. There's a lot of variables there. If someone is going to outright say no, you shouldn't kill off your enemies, you know, it's so dependent on situation. If you're getting pushed heavily, for example, in one situation, you want to get your units out immediately because they're stronger than the cultists. So
also, are you seeing the Death Brigade demolished? Granted, this was a damaged squad of assault marines and there were only 3 of them, but the Death Brigade absolutely demolished them, and I don't even have their upgrade yet. This is baseline as you get them out of the box. They're so fun, so good. So some more squads. Since I have the supply cap, more squads of Death Brigade and another squad of Assault Plague Marines. Do you like to keep like an even amount of Death Brigade to Assault Marines? Do you try to get one more of one than the other?
It really depends, again, on multiple factors. Usually I go for 2 squads of Death Brigade. I tend to only go for 1 of Assault Marines, depending on Assault Plague Marines. It again, you know, it's all about the situation you're in, but 2 for 2 can work. 2 for 2 can work. But personally, I'm more of a eco player in the earlier game, so I will refrain from buying that 1 extra squad, and Raptors could fulfill that purpose, for example, as you already had one.
Yeah, that's a good point, where 1 squad of Assault Plague Marines and 2 squads of Death Brigade plus Raptors would have probably done it. I decided to keep it even this game, but that might be a way to optimize this. So yeah, so I got the upgrades for both, and as you can see, I'm a bit starved for power. I'm trying to go for some vehicles to show off a cool strategy, but quite frankly, at this point, I could have probably attacked the enemy and killed them, or gotten 1 or 2 desecrators and killed them. I'm just trying to showcase something here. So
yeah, you're in a winning position for sure.
Yes. Yeah, this is a deceptively powerful army. So, getting all the units, getting all their upgrades, kind of thing, getting some more researches, getting meltaguns. So as you can see, the enemy brought out some aircraft, so straight away grab some meltaguns. Forgot to get them on the Raptors, so that's an optimization I can make. And then sent a squad over here to deal with the attack on this side. But yeah, when charging, one of the interesting things, the Assault Plague Marines, they have a big charge radius, so when charging into the enemy, they're actually a lot faster for instead when you're trying to get away from enemies, so that's something to note as well, where they'll be good getting in, but they'll be harder to get out of a fight. So yeah, kind of a messy fight. Stuff on both sides. The enemy base is very close, so they keep retreating into it, but I don't want to go kill the enemy just yet because I'm still trying to go for the strategy. Oh, and another thing that happened, two of the freaking transports got stuck on the ledge over here, so I had to destroy both my machine factory and the 2 generators to get them out.
You hate to see it. You hate to see it.
God, these maps with these kind of hails, so annoying. So, this is the strategy. Because these can hold 4 units each, you can put in 16 supply of tier 1 units into them. 16, 4 units, 2 supply each. Yes, 16 supply. I'm doing my math right. I have 14 supply, but you could put 16 supply into them. And yeah. Also, I don't know how I was able to cheat and get this Testudo when I didn't have the pop cap for it, but whatever. Game be gaming. And yeah, this is your mobile death army in tier 1, where you get some squad of Assault Plague Marines to tie up enemies in melee. You have some squads of Death Brigade, which aren't that slow, so they don't really need the transport, but the transport is good for protection against AoE. Like, if your squad is getting pumped by artillery, you put them back into the transport and they're fine. And yeah. So at this point the game is basically over. I get some weapons on these guys, get some grenade launchers to deal with the buildings on these guys. I think, yeah, I get a flamer and a last autocannon on the transports, and this is the timing attack. You can get this way earlier if you go for some generators earlier and don't get your vehicle stuck. So I know it's 12 minutes, it's a bit late for this kind of timing attack, but if you get some generators earlier, which you'll see in the next game, you could get something like this, where you at least have 1 transport with like 3 squads of Death Brigade and 1 squad of Assault Plague Marines by, I think, 6-7 minutes would be very doable.
Yeah. I think that would have been the difference, right? Assault Plague Marines cost how much? 200?
270 and... Yeah, they cost 90-10 per model, so 3 models to start, like 270, whilst these guys are like 120 each. So I think it's 3 squads of. So yeah, and that's the first game. So the way you go from there is you would build, even if that doesn't kill the enemy, because of how fast the transport is, you can just run it around. The enemy will have a hard time keeping up. You use the fast forced labor speed to build a second HQ, build more generators, and just continue scaling from there. Also upgrade your listening posts. Again, I haven't because I was spending my power of units, but you could spend your power on upgrading listening posts and just go full eco as well if you want to, depending on the situation. But this is a timing attack, so you have to sacrifice some economy.
Yeah.
So this one is a little bit different, where I won't be using the units from the vehicle bay. This is mostly an infantry strategy, and it will be using the Moritat kill team and the Practicus Coven. Still can't pronounce them.
Lots of micro.
Yes. This one is quite micro-intensive, where both of the units are expensive but fast, so if you miss-micro them, it can be a bit rough. But if you don't engage in fights too much until the point that the timing attack is finished and is built up, it's not actually that bad. You'll see what I mean once we're in the game. So this one is definitely a bit harder. The other strategy is easier. This is just an alternative I wanted to show off for these 2 subfactions. So, same start. Heretic, 3 Cultists, 2 Heretics, and then pick the subfactions. One thing to note is that, as you saw in the detailed breakdown, and as you can see, a second plasma generator really early. Also screwed up on the listening post capture there, whatever. We can salvage that. But yeah, anyway, so one thing to note is that you don't actually have to pick the subfactions this early. I did this game because I know what I want to play and showcase, but you could hold off. Tier 0, you definitely don't need them because you don't get no benefits from it. Tier 1, you could still get away with not picking them, even though it might be a bit risky. By Tier 2, you should probably pick your subfaction because you are missing like half of your roster at that point. And I also went for Renegades just to be able to pump out more generators as well because they are very cheap. They cost less than half that the Raptors did, so I was able to get more power earlier in order to optimize this timing attack a little bit. So upgrading listening posts, capping things around the map, pretty standard stuff. I'm speeding this up because in quite a few guides I've showed off an early build order, and this build order is nearly exactly the same as for other factions that I showed, except for getting the generators a little bit earlier. So first unit of Noise Muritat kill team. And yeah. So again, I start them off in melee. This is the beautiful thing about them. They can be in both ranged and melee depending on what you're fighting. Look at the gun kata. It's so cool. It's so freaking cool. So yeah, so now that I have the power, getting these researches and getting more of the units. Where I got the squad of, I don't know where they're not, whatever. They're displaying now. So yeah, Practicus Coven are now out. Second squad of Noise Muritat kill teams are out. And as soon as I am able, as soon as the research is done, I start getting Volkite pistols because they take a while to get. So as soon as that research is done, you want to start getting them, and that's the other thing why you want the power. As you can see, I had 6 generators really early, and that's because these guys cost 90 power each. Like, that's a lot, especially if you can get 4 of them. So this is the timing attack. You can do it earlier with maybe 1 squad of each, but I recommend waiting until you have 2 squads of each, just because it's so much more of a sharper timing attack that your opponent will have a harder time countering, because it comes out so loud and fast. So second HQ, since I had the extra resources, why the hell not? So this is where it really comes into play. This is not firing. This is not firing. This whole defensive setup that they have done, which would have done good damage to my units, and if they had some more units around here that responded quickly, I might have had to pull back, was completely obliterated with barely any damage taken, because I disabled both of those structures, and the Volkite pistols with their anti-all damage and the extra damage that the buildings take dealt with the rest. And now the Practicus Coven dealt with another listening post, while the Volkite pistols are just absolutely destroying the sisters, and yeah, that's it. That's that. Game over. Any thoughts on this?
No, that was just... There really wasn't much to comment on there. It's just the power of Slanesh and Zinj.
Yeah.
I've been playing a very similar way in the campaign, actually, and you really get to see and utilize that power a lot more.
Yeah. So yeah, as you can see, back at home, whilst all of that was going on, some more generators, built the vehicle, start building some units, go tier 2, standard stuff. So yeah, so that was the detailed CSM guide. Any closing thoughts before we sign off?
Just, go out there, experiment, and have lots of fun. It's been a lot of fun testing it, and it's a huge upgrade. So, yeah. Cheers for having me on as well.
Yeah. thank you for being here. It did make it easier. My voice hurts and I didn't even have to talk the entire time, so that would have been rough if I was talking for the entire thing. But yeah, as Avenge said, there's a lot of different playstyles and a lot of different interesting combos that you can go for between the different combinations of chapters. So yeah, go out there, experiment, see what interesting combos you can find. There's a lot of fun things. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.